Hello everyone, welcome back to the Chapter 1 channel. Today I'm going to talk about a movie that is named Emergency Declaration. At Incheon International Airport, a suspicious-looking man named Ryu is seen wandering around. Eventually, he approaches a ticket counter and asks the receptionist which flight has the most passengers. Since it is private information and against airport rules, she won't respond. At the next scene, we see a father by the name of Park and his daughter, Soo Min, standing in line to board an aircraft in the meantime. Soo goes to the restroom by herself, but because the woman's wait is too long, she uses the men's restroom. Inside, Ryu is also in the men's bathroom. When he's alone, he makes a small cut under his armpit and inserts a capsule into the wound. After stitching it up and applying dressing, he realizes that someone is watching him from within one of the restroom stalls. As Ryu moves towards the stall, Park suddenly enters the bathroom looking for his daughter. It's revealed that Soo was the one watching Ryu, and she leaves with her father to board the plane. Meanwhile, a police officer named Ino is on the phone with his wife, who is about to board a flight to Hawaii for vacation. Unfortunately, Ino can't join her due to some extra work he has to take care of. Later, when he gets to the police department where he works, a group of kids sends him a video in which one of their neighbors is threatening to hijack a plane. Ino is suspicious, but the other police choose to dismiss it as a practical joke. After some consideration, he decides to visit the kids to learn more about the situation. It turns out the man in the video is indeed their neighbor. As he becomes more suspicious, Ino and another officer investigate the man's apartment, where they are horrified to find a human body tightly wrapped in plastic in a corner of the room. Once again at the airport, Ryu, the mysterious man from earlier, approaches Park and his daughter Soo as they prepare to board the plane. He starts asking them personal questions, including where they are traveling to. As expected, Park gets angry and tells Ryu to leave them alone. Despite this, Ryu discovers that they are heading to Hawaii and books a ticket for the same destination. After passing through airport security, Ryu is questioned about a metal device in his bag, but he sets up it and confirms that it is simply his asthma inhaler. The scene then shifts to the plane, where Ryu, Park, Soo, and other passengers, including Ino's wife, have just boarded. The plane takes off following the announcements. Soon after, Ryu goes to the bathroom, removes the dressing from his wound, and takes out the capsule. He then inserts the capsule, which turns out to be a spray container, into his asthma inhaler. And sprays the entire bathroom with a mysterious substance while covering his mouth and nose. In the meantime, a CSI agent in the suspect's apartment confirms that poisoning was the cause of the body's death. Another agent discovers a box of videotapes, which show a man sprinkling a strange powder into a container with experimental rats. Shockingly, the rats start dying horribly within minutes, bleeding very badly. The agents realize with horror that the powder is actually a virus, as even the rats that didn't directly touch the powder also died. All the agents are placed on high alert when it is discovered that the dead body also tests positive for the same virus. Back on the plane, Ryu comes out of the bathroom and notices Soo waiting in line. As she opens the door, another man quickly enters, saying he urgently needs to use the bathroom. Ryu then whispers something to Soo and goes back to his seat. The man who entered the bathroom begins to cough after noticing some powder in the air. He immediately informs a flight attendant, who also enters the contaminated bathroom. Meanwhile on the plane, a passenger is watching the video about the plane threat, which catches Park's eye. Upon closer inspection, he realizes that the person in the video looks like Ryu. Frightened, Park searches for his daughter and finds her outside the bathroom. He shows the video to the flight attendants, but they are unsure if it is Ryu. Insistence, Park asks his daughter to say something. Looking terrified, she reveals that Ryu smuggled something onto the plane under his armpit and whispered to her that everyone on board would die. After hearing everything, a flight attendant eventually approaches Ryu and requests his ID. Ryu hands over a business card, claiming to be a scientist traveling to Honolulu for a conference. When the attendant presses for more details, he refuses to elaborate. Meanwhile, Ino and other officers rush to the airport, where they confirm that the person in the video is indeed Ryu. Realizing his wife is on the same flight, Ino is stunned and speechless. On the plane, a man who had entered the bathroom begins to develop rashes on his skin. Suddenly, one of his eyes bursts, and he vomits blood before collapsing to the floor. This causes chaos among the passengers. A physician on board checks the man and confirms that he has died. Following this, Park immediately accuses Ryu of murdering the man. On board are 3 pilots. Co-pilot Choi, another pilot named Jang, and main pilot Captain 1. Jang is resting before his scheduled shift, and Choi and the chief pilot are in the cockpit. Soon, the pilots in the cockpit learn about the incident and are informed by mission control about Ryu's involvement. As the situation gets out of control, co-pilot Choi leaves the cockpit and finds Park and Ryu fighting in front of the horrified crowd. He quickly breaks up their fight and realizes that he knows Park. After calming the passengers, Choi asks Ryu for identification, but Ryu pretends to be an American and tries to flee to the cockpit. The passengers manage to stop him, but not before Ryu pulls out a spray and spreads it everywhere. Choi then informs Captain 1 that everyone, including the other pilot Jang, has fallen ill. To protect Captain 1, he decides not to re-enter the cockpit. Meanwhile, government officials and experts, including Transport Minister Kim and Ino's team, are discussing the incident. After a detailed investigation, it is discovered that Ryu was once the head of microbiology at the multinational corporation Brickham. Despite repeated attempts to contact the company, they refuse to cooperate and deny any connection to the hijacking. Now that time is running out, Ino advises the authorities to try and get Ryu to provide the spray's antidote before more people die. The government listens in as Choi strikes up a conversation with Ryu shortly after the officials give their approval. However, instead of cooperating, the psychopath keeps insisting that everyone on the plane will die. Choi attempts to force him to reveal a treatment, but suddenly Ryu starts coughing up blood, showing that he too has been infected. Suddenly, the plane begins to fall. The main pilot of the airplane has died after becoming infected with the virus. Passengers are thrown around as the plane spirals downward. Jang, the other co-pilot, manages to make his way to the cockpit and tries to pull up the steering, but there is no success. Luckily, Park reaches the cockpit and pulls the speed brake up, stopping the plane before it crashes into the ground and managing the situation. Choi soon gets to the cockpit as well and sees Park in his seat. As they talk to one another, it becomes clear that Park was once a well-known pilot, but he had to step down after an accident. Jang's condition gets worse in the meantime, so Choi, the only pilot who is unaffected, mans the plane. While Ryu dies due to the infection, a passenger on the plane records the chaos around him and sends the footage to reporters. In the following scene, Ino becomes suspicious that Ryu's former employer, Brickham, is hiding something due to their refusal to cooperate. He decides to visit their headquarters to speak with the director. Shortly after arriving, Ino tries to force his way in, but security guards stop him, stating that he needs a warrant. When Ino hears this, he becomes furious and fights the guards, which a reporter captures on camera and posts online. Back on the plane, people begin to pass out and die inside the plane one by one. Therefore, the crew starts to separate them. Those showing symptoms of the virus are moved to the back of the plane, while the others go to the front. Park, who remains unaffected, heads to the front with his daughter, but they are stopped by a man who notices Sue has developed blisters. It turns out the girl has eczema, but the fearful passengers mistake it for symptoms of the virus. To prevent further tension, Sue asks her father to take her to the back of the plane, and Park reluctantly agrees. After several hours of terror, the plane is nearing the US. The Korean officials are confident that their American counterparts will handle the situation and rescue the passengers. However, they couldn't be more wrong. Acting pilot Choi receives a message from US Mission Control stating that landing permission is denied because the virus is unknown and poses too great a risk. This news devastates both the pilot and the government officials. With no other options, Choi is ordered to turn the plane back to Korea. The news spreads quickly, and all of the passengers fall into despair, losing hope of survival. Meanwhile, Ino receives a call from a Brickham employee after footage of his altercation with the guards goes viral. She reveals that another employee, Sung-hoon, fled the headquarters as soon as he saw the news, suggesting he might have collaborated with Ryu. The police rush to Sung-hoon's address, leading to a frantic chase. Unfortunately, Ino and another officer get into a car crash, resulting in minor injuries. Surprisingly, instead of fleeing, Sung-hoon helps them. Later, Sung-hoon claims he was deceived by Ryu and was not a conspirator. He informs the police that the highly infectious virus is called SC1 and was acquired illegally by Brickham. He also reveals that some researchers were exposed to the virus, leading to their deaths, except for one survivor who said Ryu had deliberately exposed them. Brickham covered up the incident by firing Ryu. After being dismissed, Ryu contacted Sung-hoon and tricked him into handing over a sample to clear his name. After hearing this, a still injured Ino tries to contact the researcher who survived the virus. Meanwhile, on the plane, the chief attendant encounters Park in the medical room and asks him why he stopped being a pilot. Reluctantly, Park explains that during his last flight, one of the engines caught fire, forcing him to make an emergency landing against the control tower's advice. His quick thinking saved all the passengers, but 2 flight attendants died while helping passengers escape. One of them was Choi's wife. Just then, in the cockpit, Choi starts coughing up blood. With all the pilots either sick or dead, he asks Park to help him co-pilot the plane, as Park is the only passenger with flying experience. Despite being traumatized by the previous incident, Park agrees to help immediately. A few hours later, Ino visits the survivor, who is still in the hospital. He shows her a photo of a corpse from earlier, and she identifies the virus as the same one she was exposed to. Soon after, the transport minister, Kim, discovers that Brickham has both the vaccine and the antivirus. She heads to their headquarters and forces them to cooperate. Later, Kim thanks Ino for his efforts, and the news announces that Brickham will provide the vaccine and antivirus for free, much to the relief of the passengers. However, Choi continues to cough up blood and decides to make an emergency landing at Narita Airport in Japan. He issues a distress call, but the Japanese control tower orders him to leave their airspace. Choi refuses, prompting the Japanese Air Force to fire warning shots. A Japanese fighter jet then approaches at high speed, nearly causing a collision. Forced to pull up, Choi becomes exhausted and passes out. Park quickly takes control and steers the plane away from Japan. The Japanese government faces backlash from the media and human rights organizations worldwide. Under pressure, the Japanese Prime Minister explains that the plane was turned away because the virus's incubation period is shorter than initially thought, meaning the vaccine or antivirus might not be effective. This news causes concern among Korean politicians, and opposition to the plane landing in Korea grows stronger. Determined to save everyone on board, Ino rushes to the quarantine facility at Seoul Airport and volunteers to be a test subject for the antivirus. He injects himself with the virus, allowing researchers to test the antivirus on him. When Kim arrives at the facility, she finds Ino in severe pain, and to everyone's horror, the antivirus fails to work. Meanwhile, violent protests erupt throughout Korea against the plane landing. The government orders the Korean Air Force to intercept the infected plane to maintain peace. The news spreads quickly, and passengers on board learn of the situation. Understanding the risk to their loved ones and others, the passengers accept their fate. Park contacts the control tower and announces that everyone on board has decided not to land, as it is the best decision for all. Before ending the communication, Park states that he will cut off all radio contact. The passengers then call their loved ones one last time as the plane heads toward the sea. Just as hope seems lost, Kim hears Ino's vital signs monitor beeping, and he suddenly wakes up. The antivirus has miraculously worked, and Ino urges authorities to call the plane back. The control tower tries to reach the plane, but its radio is off. As a last effort, they ask families to contact the passengers by phone. The plan succeeds, and when the passengers receive the message, they cheer with joy. Park turns the radio back on, and the plane heads for a nearby airbase. Unfortunately, the plane is low on fuel and loses power. The only option is to glide down to the small airbase, but the high speed risks skidding off the runway. Fortunately, Park's experience comes through. He circles the area a few times to reduce speed and then begins the descent at the perfect moment. The plane hits the ground, shakes, but lands safely, bringing immense relief to everyone. Several days later, Park attends a reunion of the survivors. He meets co-pilot Choi and Ino, who, sadly, has been left permanently paralyzed by the virus. However, his bravery saved hundreds, possibly thousands, of lives. The movie ends with Ino raising his head slightly and smiling at Park. Thanks for watching everyone. Have a good day.